Jono, how are you, sir?
Good evening, Matt. Mate, coming to you from downtown Adelaide today, and I'm bloody great. Yeah, spring in my step.
What spring in your step? Well, that's a good start. So this is our letter from Australia, Alistair Cook style. Right. Well, look, what are you doing down in Adelaide? That's not where you're normally based, is it?
No, I'm based in Sydney, but at least at the moment, South Australia is the only state in Australia where you can export uranium from. So I have been visiting the Honeymoon ISR uranium project, kindly hosted
Ah,
by our good friend Duncan Craig at
very,
Boss, um,
very
to
good.
show Australia and show Western Australia what an ISR project looks like. And I basically want to take Honeymoon, build it in WA.
Okay. Okay, so a bit of research from you. Actually, I was meant to speak with Duncan this morning. I think he was busy with you, so I'm going to speak with him tomorrow and see what the heck's going on there.
Mate, we,
Maybe
we
we'll talk
just
about
got
it a
we
little
just got
bit.
the plane back. Yep. So you can tell
Right. Well,
behind me I'm in the hotel room.
okay. Well, in which case, I doubly appreciate you making time to speak. Maybe we'll talk about what's going on down there at Boss in a second. So we're going to go run through a few topics and find out what is happening in Western Australia, political and operational, and maybe some of your thoughts on maybe WNA
Yep.
we had last week, and maybe a few other topics which people might like to understand your thoughts on. So, like, why don't we kind of kick off? I mean, politically, we always got to start politically with you. You know, what is happening in Australia? We've seen recently Trump make sort of rather negative and disparaging comments about your prime minister.
He's not the only one.
Well, if I say, what
Yeah.
is he? Was he right? And how do you think those relations are going now?
Yeah. Well, so I guess Australia has joined the UK and others in recognising Palestine, which, I think many would say there's not so question about the outcome and the recognition of the two-state solution. The question is the timing of it, and that interaction with the US. So I'm sure that did not. Albo already had a tricky relationship with Mr. Trump, and I'm sure that didn't help, frankly. So we've
Right.
been the media's been having a bit of a field day with that. There's a particular clip on If History where Albo was asked, what do you think of Mr. Trump? And Albo admits, he goes, he bloody scares me. I'm scared of him. And so the media's been having a bit of a field day with that. And obviously, the other thing politically in Australia is we've set our 2035 emissions reduction targets last week, and they've been set at sort of 62 to 70% reduction from 2005 levels. And basically, that's made no one happy. The left don't think they went hard enough. The right think net zero is a joke, and we'll kill the economy. So everyone's basically piling on the government because whichever side you're on, you don't seem to have been happy.
Well, I think that's the wonderful thing about politics. If you think you can design by committee, you're going to please no one, and you're going to end up with this abomination of set of decision making. But just sticking with Albo a little bit in terms of what Australia can offer the world. The US, Trump in particular, has been trying to make friends with everyone. Well, make enemies as well, obviously, with China, Russia, and any kind of BRICS countries. But Australia seems to be important to the US in terms of critical minerals. Obviously, Alba's meeting with him in the next few weeks. It could be important from that point of view for Aussie projects, no?
Yeah. So remind viewers, Australia has not yet negotiated a trade deal with the US, and the second thing that's going on is that Trump, in a sort of a power move, has announced that he's reviewing the AUKUS arrangement, which is the arrangement where we buy nuclear submarines from the US and the UK. In return, there's been messaging back to the US from Australia to the US saying, all those ex-China rare earths you want. Well, Australia's got those spades, as well as a whole host of other critical minerals. So, how can we provide you some kind of, priority access to our critical minerals in return for a broader trade deal? The missing link out of that, and it's only missing because our government is sort of scared of radiation, nuclear energy, is the most critical shortage that the US has is in high ESG Western leaning uranium supply. And again, Australia's got more uranium than anywhere else. So, as an industry, we would be saying to our government, why the hell are you not putting the strongest foot forward possible? And that would include saying to the US, you can use, we'll open up our uranium markets. Now, funnily enough, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in that field now where, let's see where we land. But you can see that I've got a bit of a smile on my face about this topic. So I'm very confident, more confident than I've always been confident, more confident that we're getting real progress.
Right, but I'm just trying to. Obviously, those discussions are yet to happen, but Trump and the US has had discussions with other friendly countries. There must be an expectation of what Australia wants out of this, and maybe how that kind of trickles down to companies. Because I think what we've seen in the US is obviously a lot of companies downstream seems to be getting allocated capital. Obviously, as a miner yourself, you're going to maybe want to see that kind of trickle down a little bit quicker. What would you want Albo to be negotiating on your behalf? What would you?
So, for uranium industry, and uranium is a little bit different to other critical minerals in that when we build our project, our capex bill won't be in the billions of dollars. You can build a uranium project for a couple of $100 million. Now, that just means that the capital and financing hurdle is actually quite a lot lower, and therefore we have less of a need for these government funding, priority, long-dated, low-interest loans and all this kind of stuff. Now, I'll take it if it's often, but that's not so important. What is important from our perspective is why don't we have a federal government which works with the states, because mining is a state-based matter in Australia, works with the states to overturn some of these regulations and bans in certain jurisdictions, which, hey, look, maybe they were justified 20 years ago or whenever. They're not justified now. The world needs uranium. We've got plenty of it. We should be moving forward on that. And then there are some pretty detailed regs that could change. For example, in Australia, as soon as you mention uranium, you're automatically in the field of a federal environmental approval under what's called the EPBC Act and the nuclear trigger under Section 21A. So uranium is already treated differently to any other commodity. And as an industry, we would say, look, with where the industry's got to globally and everything else, that's no longer relevant. Yes, we can have a federal environmental approval if we trigger a federal environmental matter, not just because we are uranium. That's one example where I think the industry would like to get to.
Okay. Well, look, and I do want to talk about uranium. That's the point of this conversation. But I think just in terms of understanding the ecosystem in Australia, it's worth we're touching on some of the politics here, and we'll get into Western Australia, your backyard, in a second. But things like coming back to this kind of net zero hodgepodge of a solution, obviously, going back down to 62, 70% of reduction by, I think I'm not sure I understand what that actually means. So can we look at, what that means going forward in terms of competition for uranium, which is going to come from renewables, apparently. So is Australia going to continue pumping money into renewables?
Well, my views on this, and Matt, there's been some movement since. I think the answer is yes, and they've actually, put together some more sort of, priority funding packages and everything to help boost your renewables along. That said, the promise of certain of the renewable strategies, such as green hydrogen and such as offshore wind in Australia, we've flirted with this for a few years now. We have wasted an inordinate amount of money, but probably what's more important, we've wasted time and scarce resource and scarce management time and effort, barking up the wrong tree, right? And so, I think in green hydrogen, it's fair to say I don't know that we've achieved nothing, but we've achieved next to nothing. We are back at square one. And it's not the hundreds of millions or billions or whatever, because a lot of the pledged money was never spent, but it's just the waste of effort. Whereas, if we'd taken all that effort and put it into, for example, another baseload green energy source, say nuclear energy, we'd have a well-developed system and be on the pathway. So, there's frustrations about the priorities of our government spend on that. That's for sure. But Chris Bowen is doubling down and says we're going to keep going.
He's definitely keeping going because he's still banging on about home batteries, right? So, is that going to suck out more taxpayer money?
Yeah, it's going to suck up billions. And what's curious about the home battery scheme, I think I might have mentioned this before, but in Australia we have the Australian Energy Market Operator, the AEMO, that generates a system plan to tell the country this is how we're going to build the future network. And this is how we can say renewables are cheapest because look at our plan and it's cheap. What they fail to cost that is the cost of the private sector having to fund all of, or a huge proportion, about 2/3 of the storage capacity of the entire NEM is assumed to be funded by private capital through home batteries. So they don't cost that in their system plan. Now, funnily enough, they're giving about a 30% rebate on batteries now, but you know what? They don't cost the cost of the government rebate in the cost of the plan either. So it's very easy to say intermittent renewables are cheaper if your cost of firming is zero. And that's essentially what happens in the government modelling. So unfortunately, it's something that sort of is lost on Australians. And Mr. Bowen has a new slogan that I'm sure he has been focus grouping, where he says, for the first time, Australians are in charge of their own energy destiny. They've got their own choice. They manage their energy. And my polite comment to the minister, where I ratioed him on LinkedIn actually, was to say, Minister, that's because they've had to pay for the bloody capital themselves, right? I don't want choice in my energy. I want the system to deliver me cheap, abundant energy, which is what used to happen. Now in Australia, the only way you can get cheap power is to deploy your own private capital to do that. To me, that's a failure of policy.
So, I think that makes sense. To me, ultimately, people want cheap energy, within reason, obviously, but choice of a bunch of bad choices or options doesn't make it a choice. It just gets a captive audience, right? Right. Well, Stockholm syndrome. Yes, that is it. Yes. Right. Let's kind of get on to this subject near and dear to your heart. It's obviously what's going on in Western Australia. We've seen lots of conversation. It's like disappointing elections, and how that's affecting the uranium players, the nuclear industry, nuclear potential, and the cost of energy. Therefore, Western Australia, you've got your Premier has made some positive-ish statements recently, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. So, for viewers, WA has had this strange inconsistency where we've been too scared to mine uranium because apparently it's dangerous. Yet we've been going gung-ho into hosting and maintaining nuclear submarines in Western Australia. And just last week, the government announced a $12 billion investment in the submarine and nuclear submarine sustainment facility in Western Australia. So they're very super keen on all that, where they've got like 90% enriched uranium, yet they're scared about 0.7% uranium that we would mine and export as yellow cake. So that's the history. Yes, a couple of weeks ago, the Premier, in a wide-ranging sort of interview ahead of a trip to our major trading partners in Japan, for the first time admitted publicly that they're looking at what to do, that they would be working with industry. They're keeping an eye on it. And they've also implemented a parliamentary inquiry, that's process, right? So that, how do you change policy while making sure all your stakeholders all get a hearing? Well, you do a parliamentary inquiry. So that is underway in Western Australia now. In fact, submissions close on the 10th of October. So, you can imagine I'll be putting in an encyclopedic submission in there, and very, very hopeful of the future. And I think it's a very, very clever strategic political move by the Premier. So good on you, Premier.
Good on you, Premier. And timing. on all of this? Because my view of politicians is especially in Australia, is quite low. A lot of talk, a lot of grandstanding, not a
Yeah.
lot of capital, and it's vote winning usually. So, what are your hopes?
So we had an election in WA earlier in 2025, and the next one is due in 2029. And it's in March 2029. We have fixed terms. I think, the political calculus at the moment goes like this. The nuclear industry internationally is going gangbusters. You can no longer deny that. That sort of means that in the longer term, that policy of uranium ban in WA is unsustainable, especially given these nuclear submarines that we're doing. So the Premier is a very smart political calculator. He can't have that. He doesn't want that as an election issue in 2029 because he's on the wrong side of it, right? So, you want to change it midterm. So it's just not an issue that can come up as an election issue. Now that would mean that you're changing it, sometime towards late next year. And you know what? Funnily enough, we have a parliamentary inquiry now that is due to report back to government. I think it's in September next year. So the submissions close in mid-October. Then they have 10 months of evidence, debating, advocacy, whatever you call it, until the final report is written. So, I think that timing is all pretty measured and calculated. And I think hopefully, there can be all sides can get a hearing, and there can be a proactive outcome for all of us.
Right. But when they kind of make sort of statements like this and they're talking about working with industry, etc., it's not exactly something you can take to the bank, realistically. But in terms of that engagement, what do you do as a company? What are other uranium hopefuls do in terms of kind of taking advantage of that chink in the armor, that open door?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably known as the most out there of the uranium CEOs encouraging policy change. We're also working with community and just educating the public, because we do have a dearth of accurate information on some of our aspects of our sector. So I think, this parliamentary inquiry that's coming up, you will see a lot of submissions from industry, number one. And we can already say that the first submissions have been accepted by the committee and published publicly. And number one was about uranium. So the inquiry is broader, doesn't actually mention uranium. It mentions how can WA help its major trading partners decarbonise by the export of green fuel. And so it doesn't actually mention uranium. So they'll talk about LNG, how WA can help the global decarbonisation by selling LNG so people burn less coal. That's number one. But uranium fits within it too, and the first submission was in uranium. So I think you'll see quite a coordinated approach across industry. I know you will. And, then it's just a case of, for example, dismantling some of the historical arguments against the industry with facts, just plain facts and education. And I'm very confident that we can do that. And, seeing today, for example, being out at honeymoon, seeing South Australia has a 40-year history of successful and safe operation and building social license proves it can be done. Just got to get on and do it.
Well, I guess that's all kind of common sense. I think the trouble with common sense in politics is it's not very common. So, how do you think this is playing? Do you think this is playing out as you expected?
Yeah, there are some that are calling me the uranium whisperer, Matt, because I was saying this about 18 months ago, that this would be the pathway forward. So, yeah, look, I think, and again, you see me honestly bash Chris Bowen a lot because I disagree strongly with his vision for energy policy in Australia. Actually, the Labor government in WA is sort of Labor light. They've even the Labor Premier Cook disagrees with our federal government on mining and energy policy, right? And so the general view is actually Premier Cook's doing a pretty damn good job, and I think we've just all got to come together and work out what is a sustainable pathway forward, with appropriate controls and rules in place and protections to make sure things go well. We've done this in the past. I was part of the team, led the team that got the radioactive waste repository built and approved and built in WA. Now, that required a change of government policy. Got done. Very sensible WA government doing that. Now they have a world's best practice asset sitting there ready to help our industry. So I think there is a history of achieving policy change, and we can do it again.
Well, I hope the uranium whisperer is as successful with politicians as horse whisperers are with horses. Keep me up to date, or at least film it. It'd be interesting. Hey, look, you mentioned you were obviously with Duncan Craig at Boss Energy, and you're having a look around. There's things to be learnt from them, which you can use yourselves with Cauldron. So, what have you learned? What were you looking at? What were you discussing?
Yeah, so that was my first time out at Honeymoon, and that's important because we only have 2 operating ISR projects in Australia, Honeymoon and Bellevue 4 Mile, and we want to build an ISR project in Western Australia. So good to go and see what they're all about, and the capital is deployed and the scale of it. I think it was first of all, shout out to Duncan and the team and Matt, the incoming MD who was there and hosted us as well. Like, fantastic, and just such a great team and such a great culture they built out there. So I think the importance of the people that they've got there, and I was talking to their head of radiation safety and their head of the who controls the leach tanks and their operators, right? And they're all ex Olympic Dam, or they're all ex Beverley 4 Mile. They've got a very good experienced team there. So number one is get the right people. And the way that plant is performing, and they've had some issues with their expectations on future production, but the way they've done that plant, geez, it's impressive. It's really good. Yeah, and we will obviously learn from the way they've done that, and take those learnings across in terms of the technology they've deployed for the leaching, the pumps, the patterns on the wells, everything else. Yeah, great.
Do you know what? And I've said this for the last 5 years, and some of the old hands have been saying this as well. It's like, this is not easy. This is not easy to do. This uranium mining, and it's never a kind of straight line. There will be bumps along the road, and it's how you handle that. And if you've got the team to be able to handle that and kind of move on. So I think I agree with you that, I think maybe Boss has slightly mismanaged their communication over the last year.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think the market's expectations needed. Well, market's expectations needed to be managed, but at the same time, the market needs to be realistic about all of these new projects coming into production. Even restarts will come across challenges. They really will. And they will get over it if they know how to get over it. And if they don't, then they're in a whole world of hurt and pain. In the meantime, people that you can learn from their mistakes and hopefully design things differently. They've been very accommodating to show us around, and we've got a great relationship with their management team, and I'll be back on site checking things out again in due course. Yeah, just really good day. Tickled pink to be really good day for you. But I think everyone's on positive and buoyant, and you're skipping a step as well, like you. But things what we can't afford in this sector, and I'm not talking just Aussie, but we've seen it happen in Africa, we've seen it happen in North America as well, where those projects which are producing, when they do experience issues, it affects everyone equally.
Yes,
the knock-on effect is significant. There's ripples,
and look,
run far and
it's
wide.
Been fantastic. For example, the Peninsula has achieved first production finally. At Lance, shareholders have obviously seen a 50% return over the last 2 weeks. Good for them, long-suffering shareholders. But it's important that right.
From a low base,
average down.
That success was 2 years in the making. So
Well, and then that's the first drum, right? Who knows how the actual ramp? So they've elected a 3-year ramp up to production on that. But it's important that those projects are successful. We want ISR projects to be successful around the world, and that's not from an yes, we sort of compete with other projects, but no, we kind of don't, because we want them to be successful so that we can be successful too as an industry. And so, yeah, we all, we can learn from their successes and their failures. And that's what, we've recently announced a deal with Navoan, which was the Uzbeki national uranium company. And why? Well, because they've got 42 different uranium fields, right? They invented ISR uranium. And, if they are the most experienced in solving technical issues on ISR. So why not have them on your team, right? So that's it's a really exciting initiative for us, and demonstrates how we can learn from everyone around the world and make sure we do it right.
Yeah, and I think obviously they bring a lot of technical. So what was in terms of what have you signed up for in terms of working with them, or them working with you?
Yeah, so the first step is an MOU, basically saying we intend to technically cooperate with each other. In Australia, so Navoan is an Uzbeki state-owned enterprise, which means before they give me $1, they have to get Foreign Investment Review Board approval in Australia. And number two, Uzbekistan doesn't necessarily have a consular or embassy representation in Australia. So that whole process is going to take a little bit of time. But, discussions to date, no red flags, the Australian government understands that Uzbekistan is not Russia, and Navoan in particular has already signed agreements with Urano, Itochu, Cameco, Morabini, all sorts of Western companies. So, I think that pathway is fine, but it does take a little time to sort of more formalize things. I'm looking forward to the team from Navoan coming out to our project in the coming month. We're about to go out drilling, just finalizing a few of the timeframes on that. Things moving around a little bit, but once we're out drilling, we want them there to observe and give some understanding. So yeah, we intend to move forward with that arrangement soon.
Well, actually, give us a little update on you guys at Cauldron. Obviously, you've seen a little pop in the share price, a little bit more interest in the sector. How are you taking advantage of them? What are you getting up to?
So yeah, we've had I guess a few good announcements. One was the market really liked the Navoan deal, and that might have been off the back of concern from the investment community after what the troubles boss had. So, one of the ways we message that is, well, we're getting literally the guys that know more about this than anyone else in the world on our team to help us through the design phase. We've also announced we are going out to drill again, and we have 42 million pounds in JORC, which is a good amount. But our high-grade zone literally extends on our resource, and it stops at a tenement boundary because we didn't own the tenement next door. So we picked that up earlier this year. We picked it up from Twiggy Forest, actually. And that's the focus. So just continuing the high-grade zone is our focus for the drilling. It's only a small campaign this year, but I know where to drill. So hopefully there's not too many dud holes, and we get a nice pop in the resource space. But the big thing that's moved the needle is the market change in messaging that has occurred in the last few weeks from the government and this parliamentary inquiry. We are seen as, at the forefront of the WA industry. So, and I'm not shy marketing about it, Matt. So, eyes come on the stock, and that's really pushed us through. So we raised capital at 0.6%, share price 2.5-3 months ago. We hit 2 cents today. So that was there's a nice return there for investors.
And then what else are you up to in terms of, you're obviously uranium whispering and at the kind of forefront, kind of pushing some of these politicians to maybe understand the benefits of nuclear and therefore uranium by inference. Are you taking part in any other kind of conferences, talks, discussions with government?
Yes. So, and, people might think in Australia that, because the election was lost and we're not going to be building nuclear energy here, civilian nuclear for a while, things might be a little bit down. But, we've had UNSW, which is the University of New South Wales, just open up for the first time ever in Australia an undergraduate degree in nuclear engineering. So they held a conference a couple of weeks ago in conjunction with the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency, NEA. And, the NEA, it was a brilliant move. The NEA flew in students from around the world to you somehow got accepted. And they flew in to this conference. We had a workshop with these global students. So, I was up on stage there with a bit of imposter syndrome, with the deputy energy secretary from the US and Sir Robert Grimes, actually from the UK, who was one of your foremost nuclear minds. There with another chap who had literally 500 published papers on nuclear energy, and including like two or three PhDs. And there's me. That was just great to be able to participate in that environment. I actually called out the CEO of ANSTO. So ANSTO is our peak nuclear body in Australia. I'm very proud of ANSTO and what we do. And I was berating the CEO of ANSTO for not having good enough merch, because I like, mate, I've got my ANSTO cap that I wear proudly, but you don't have enough of it. Like, why aren't you singing from the rafters how freaking good ANSTO is? So he's promised to get onto that, and hopefully produce a bit more merch. And then I've also been down at ANU, which is Australian National University in Canberra, teaching a class to the nuclear physics students on the fuel chain, front end of the fuel chain, and how Australia can play a role. So I really, there are so many students interested in the sector, even though, we're not necessarily building reactors here, but it's great to see those young minds, and they're all way smarter than me. And it's just, it's a good feeling to be able to help out in a little bit of way.
I think that's brilliant. Getting up there and shouting from the rafters. It's important for people to kind of realize it's okay to talk about nuclear. Nuclear does have a role to play, and it's not everything has been painted out to be for the past few decades. But the other kind of important component, and obviously you as a CEO of a public exploration, company that wants to move into development and production, is that people understand the sort of timeframes involved to build these things out. This supply chain starts with you guys. Do they get it?
Yeah. So, one of the big things with this part of our last federal election was, it's going to take, a minimum of 15 years to build a nuclear power station. And a lot of the focus around the world is how long it takes power stations to be built. What the industry doesn't realize is how long it takes to build a uranium mine. And you're looking at probably 20 years from discovery through to first production, through construction and commissioning. Now that all came to a bit of a head. Matt, I'm not sure if you were at WNA in London a few weeks ago, where the new Red Book report was out, and the nuclear fuel report, where it says, well, we need a shitload more uranium, but there isn't a 15-year gap before we need it. And that's the problem, because they assume that new supply comes on pretty quick. And I think what we've been discussing is that new supply comes on and it's always hard, and it never meets expectations. And we need a lot more of it. So, I think that growing realization is behind, we've seen some nice moves in spot, and we've also seen contracting price, continuing to be firm. People are wondering where that uranium is going to come from in the early 2030s.
Yeah, I think it's a real problem. Yeah, I was at WNA, and we sat and spoke to a lot of companies and a lot of the kind of industry players as well. The WNA report is consistently disappointing to me in the sense that it doesn't truly reflect supply numbers in my mind. We're doing a bit of digging, and we'll come out with this in next week, and we'll sort of have a look at what they're suggesting in terms of supply, because most companies, put forward numbers which are hugely optimistic, and because they need to, because they're market facing, obviously. And I would like to believe that WNA doesn't take that at face value, because I think that would be problematic, should we say? So we'll take a look at, we'll do some digging. We'll come out next week, folks, and sort of tell you what we find. But equally, they're also quite over optimistic on the demand side of things, because these plants do not get built on time, on schedule, and therefore the demand isn't necessarily coming to a kind of critical point as soon as we think either. But all of that said, the gap is still massive. If it's not 2030, it's 2032, 33 type of thing. I'm not talking problematic there. My problem still continues to be with supply, because I'm at these sorts of prices, no one's incentivized, and that's not taken into account. So
I think
coming, folks.
You've had a little bit of a change since the last report, whereby so look, Western new build is obviously slow, and it's always going to be slow, and it'll probably be overestimated in terms of the speed at which it can get done, though. But what you've seen since the last report is actually really good progress on restarts, on deferrals and life extensions, and that hits that curve. That's that sort of, it's not the next year curve, but it's the 2 to 5 year curve, where that uranium, I think that part of the curve is outperformed where we previously thought it would be, and then whether or not Western, Chinese new build going ahead gangbusters, Indian going ahead gangbusters. When we find the UK's, you'll get there. But yes, these AP1000s are in planning in the US, but they will take their time. But France saying they're going to refurb and life extend 20 their existing reactors. You've got Constellation saying they're ahead on schedule on a couple of their restarts in the US, and that really helps. That helps, bulletproof that front end of the chain. So I think that's good for pricing.
Yeah, we shall see. Like I say, we'll do a bit more work on it before I kind of comment too much about it now. But WNA report has improved, but I still think there's a lot of gaps, and maybe there's a lot in terms of the way that they kind of deliver that content. It is written for industry. It's not written for retail investors. But so we're going to need to read between the lines a little bit. Here, folks. Well, John, nice roundup. You, like I say, you do have a skip in your step. Things do look positive, and I guess you're taking advantage of that as well. Stay in touch, man. Stay in touch, because it's always good to see what everyone's thinking the other side of the pond over there.
Yeah, well, and it's not just us, but it's the entire ASX uranium sector's on a bit of a tear. I think ASX uranium really went lower than our North American counterparts. So we've got a bit of ground to make up. So that's been happening, which is good. And then I would say for us, asymmetric upside on policy change. So, we'll continue to outperform as certainty or as policy change becomes more widely understood and more firm. So I'd say to everyone, get CXU on your watch screen, because it's going to be an interesting ride.